I want to thank each and every one of you for spending some time with me this morning. And my role to this morning is I want to make sure you have some take-home information. When I come out to these meetings, one of the things that typically happens, I probably walk away with more information than I give out, but hopefully we have some good dialogue. And this is the first meeting. I want you to, the people sitting at your table, take advantage of the opportunities to visit and with those people around you. Okay, my background. I am 62 years of age. I grew up between Decatur and Taylorville, Illinois, in a little town called Blue Mountain, about 1,200 people. My folks lived through the Depression. We had a small, diversified family farm. And some of you, your parents and grandparents' operation might have been very similar. We had Hampshire hogs. We had 3 Guernsey cows that we milked by hand. We had chickens. We had corn, soybeans, wheat, oats, and some hay. Mom baked to make extra money, and Dad did whatever you could. We always showed butter at the Illinois State Fair, and basically it was a very diversified operation. On the way to church every Sunday, we delivered eggs and milk. Some of you might be too young to remember those days, but that was an important part. It's interesting how history repeats itself, and we're getting back to some of those basics. Okay, my education's a little different. I went to Millikan University, and you're going to say, they don't have an ag department, but I've got a business degree. And what that has actually helped me do a lot is develop risk management, marketing, accounting, and those principles that I think sometimes we lack in agriculture. So I use my business principles from that side, coupled with my practical experience on the farm. I've had 33 years of lending experience starting in farm credit back in the 70s. And yeah, I was there during the 80s. And I've also worked at 2 community banks for the last 22 years. And I've focused on agriculture. The most logical question as you're sitting out here, what do you know about organics and how do you get started? That would be my question if I'm in your shoes. Number one, there's a gentleman in the back of this room, Jack Ersman, and I call him the godfather of organic farming. And I tell you what, this industry owes so much to the people that have been there and done that and laid the groundwork. Dave Bishop, we got a lot of people that come to these meetings that have paved the way for what we're seeing today. Jack Ersman was one of those people that I kind of looked at, and I'll be honest with you, back in the 90s when you were doing some things, Jack, I scratched my head and go, as a banker, how does that work? And then I started pushing a pencil, and as I pushed the pencil and I thought, okay, here's what he's getting for it, here's his yield, okay, some of the inputs aren't quite as high. You know, this may have a chance of cash flow, and this might be something unique and different. Okay, that was in the 1990s. Jack did something interesting. We put on meetings at one of the churches down there, and he said, hey, I've got a gentleman that, can I have him come out and speak for you sometime? We had like 15 speakers, and we had all different topics. He said, I've got a guy named Fred Kirschman in North Dakota. Was that right, or is it South Dakota? North Dakota. He said, can I bring him in and have him speak for the bank? This was 30 years ago. If you know anything about Fred Kirschman, he ended up being a head of the Leopold Center. And it was amazing. I've not forgot this, and you tell me, you know, as I get older, sometimes some of the verbiage changes a little bit. But I can remember him standing up there saying, we have a choice in agriculture. Do we want to be a Walmart farmer and farm a lot, raise a lot, and sell it for a little, or do we want to have a little and sell it for a lot? And I'll tell you what, that's where I see agriculture today. And that was 30 years ago he was talking. So that helped shape and form my mind a little bit. The second thing is, about 5 years ago, I started working with some organic producers. And I feel sorry for those people because they had to train me, and they're still training and teaching me. And that's, I would assume a lot of you are in that same situation. Okay, the third thing was about 2.5 years ago, I was at a Farm Bureau conference, and somebody said, hey, how would you like to speak at a meeting? And I thought, okay, what kind of meeting is it? It's an organic meeting. And it was Land Connection. So I don't know if this is the original badge, but I kept one. And so that was kind of my start into organic farming. So my wife says, why don't you charge? And I said, if I charge, then I'm going to have to be good at what I do. As long as I'm the warm-up act and I don't charge, I might still be popular. So I started speaking in 2014. And the things that I found, we'll get into them in a minute, but there are so many wonderful people like the Jack Ersmans, the Dave Bishops, the Gary McDonalds, Harold Wilkins. There are some people with a wealth of information that are here to help, and we need to learn off of their experiences. Problems determined in organics. As I started to research for my program, the first thing I wanted to look for as a bank, where do I get financial information and financial history information? Guess what? I couldn't find any. This is not something that the universities do a lot of work and research. So, okay, I believe in option B, option C, and option D. Just like this morning, you know, when the PowerPoint doesn't work, you go back to handouts. Okay, so in that situation, I sent out surveys to customers, or to organic producers, for information on both their cash flows and financial history. The second, so that was problem number one that I discovered in the industry. The second thing I did is I said, how did you determine the lender you're going to work with and what were the traits that were important? Much to my surprise and disappointment, you know what that survey came back? It said, we have been unable to find a lender to work with us. So what is happening then? Number one, a lot of producers at that point were working out of their pocket, which, you know, you're not going to grow very fast doing that. Some of them put it on credit cards. And third, a lot of them were going through their family members and borrowing money. That was a major limiting factor that I saw in the industry. The third problem that I saw when we talked about what kind of farm leases do you have, I discovered something really quick. Most of the farm ground in Illinois is either owned by the farmer or it's family ground. Very little of the ground is rented from landlords that are not related to you. And okay, that became my third problem in the industry that was limiting it. So I kind of did this, the 3 L's that create problems in organic: land, lenders, and landowners. Those were 3 areas that I needed to focus on. About 2014 or a little before that, I went to a walk to Emmaus. And at that, I tried to recommit myself and priorities to God. So at that particular meeting, I thought, how can I do a better job of serving God? So what I've tried to do is make a goal and purpose to put out financial information and to basically, how can I take information to both landowners and lenders and assist you in this industry? Okay, let's get on a different topic. How would I describe the current environment in agriculture? You guys will probably get a chuckle out of this because as a banker, and what's going on and what you're hearing in the coffee shops. Okay, anybody in here a Clint Eastwood fan? Okay, back, I don't know if it's the 60s or 70s, they all kind of wash together anymore, but there was an Italian Western called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And I'll tell you what, that's what I see in today's agriculture. So which part of those categories do you fit in? I look at organic and non-GMOs as the good part of the industry. So what is the ugly? The ugly are conventional farmers and cash flows that are not working right now. And excuse me, that's the bad. The ugly part is I really believe we'll see about 10% less farmers at the end of this year. Some of it due to retirement, some of it due to landowners passing away and selling it, and older farmers losing ground, and a lot of 20 to 40-year-old farmers that have overcommitted and not making adjustments to their cash flows. In the past year, this is kind of a wild statement for a 62-year-old to say, I probably changed and learned more this past year in agriculture than at any other time in my 33-year career. That is exciting, but whenever you have change, that's challenges as well. Reminds me of a little story I seen several years ago. It was about 2 shoe salesmen that went to a foreign country, and they decided they were going to grow their market. So they went to this foreign country. So the first one, I was thinking about how to say this without outdating my age. You know, I would have said called, but you know, maybe it's fax, maybe it's tweet, maybe some of you have different modes of communication than that. But the first one contacted the CEO, said, I've shopped around down here, I've talked to a lot of people, did a lot of research. Nobody down here wears shoes, there's no opportunities, and it's a waste of my time, I'm coming home. The second rival shoe salesman, he contacted his CEO. He says, you know what, nobody down here wears shoes, but everyone is a potential customer, and there's unlimited opportunities and no competition. This is our future. Okay, what I want to challenge you as I go through some of this material, are we looking at the future as a challenge or as an opportunity? And this is an exciting time in agriculture, depending on how you look at it. Okay, anybody ready to leave, or are we still on board here this morning? Okay, let's turn to page, it says 2000 Illinois Farm Summary. One of my financial sources of data in Illinois is Farm Business Farm Management through the University of Illinois. And I looked at 2015 to kind of give us a handle We're going to look at 15, 16, and 17 comparisons. Everybody find that? This is the handout that was passed out. 2015 Illinois Farm Summary. This looks at 2,647 farmers in the state of Illinois, conventional farmers. They had 191 bushel of corn and 62 bushel beans. As I look at a 5-year average, that's probably average plus. Would anybody be comfortable with 191 and 62 on an average year? Good, bad, or indifferent? What do you think? Okay, I would say that's probably not a bad year. But if I also told you the average return, when you factor everything in, they lost $314 an acre on corn and $216 on beans on those kind of yields, that's a little scary. Okay, why did that happen? From 2012, there was some major changes in farming and the spending patterns. I call them the big three, and I try to focus on them. A lot of times in our cash flows that we get out, we don't show family living net cost, we do not show term payments on principal payments, and we don't show income tax. And those are kind of the hidden factors. And what those amount to, for example, in Illinois, family living cost is around $80,000 a year, and the net cost on that runs about $37 an acre when you take the off-farm income. So $37 on every acre of production would go toward family living deficiency. Income tax is $30 an acre. We don't factor that in our cash flows and our break-even points. And what happened after 2012, we decided there was a new agriculture, a new era, and life was going to be good. So we went out and bought a lot of equipment and land so we didn't have to pay taxes. And all of a sudden, we have $70 an acre commitment in those areas. So what that amounts to, 71 cents a bushel on corn and $2.21 for those three per bushel. You had a question, sir?
What's your last item?
Term payments. Term payments. This would be principal on land and machinery payments. So when you add those up, break-even points on corn were $5.39 when we add those in. The average sale cost in Illinois, $3.74. The old adage that I use a lot, Houston, we have a problem. And that's the way agriculture was. When we look at soybeans, in 2015, we showed $12.73 cost with those added. Average sales price was $9.35. So we had good farmers with good records, with average yields, losing money conventionally. Okay, does everybody see a picture of what happened in 15? Okay, any questions on that page? We got a lot of material to cover. Let's go to the next page. It says 2016 crop year.
Hey, Richard,
yes.
If this is true, what are the average farm operator doing? Are they just pulling it out of their equity?
Okay, that's a good question. What actually happened is there was a lot of money made in 2012 and 13, so there was a lot of working cash built up. But what's happened, we're going to see in 15 and maybe 16 and 14, we started depleting some of that. So we're eroding away at those cash positions. Last year, we saw a lot of refinancing and talking with the FMHA, and we're very fortunate today to have the chief examiner for the state of Illinois, Jeff Cook, in the back. Jeff Cook, I've worked with him and known him. He's a great man, and we appreciate all the support FSA. But we saw situations that they were 3 months behind processing loans. I don't know if you guys would agree or disagree with that last year, but in some of the counties. But there was that much refinancing going last year because of cash flow issues. And we'll get into that a little more, but that's part of the 10% that I see struggling this year. Okay, as we look at 16, the captions at the top, income is higher, expenses are similar. Okay, what we're looking at on conventional, and you'll say, why do you have two numbers up there? Okay, on corn, we looked at, originally I put 210 bushel of corn at $3.50. The second number was, after some of the harvest in our area, we had some guys averaging 230 bushel. So I thought, okay, let's use those and we'll just show side-by-side comparisons. The $1,200 on organics, that was 150 bushel at $8. And that's where that number came from. So right there, right off the chute, you can see there's a big difference on the gross income. And the magic number that I look at is the $1,200. That's a number you want to shoot at if you're in the organics for both corn and soybeans. Okay, expenses. One of the myths that I've ran into with organics is a lot of people perceive on the outside, or our bankers might, that number one, your expenses should be significantly below conventional. And what I've seen is in most cases it's not, because you're going to put soil additives, you're going to put fertilizer replacements, you're going to have more bean walkers, there's going to be more costs. But they're going to be very similar, but it's going to be slightly higher. So when we get down to the bottom line on corn, at $210 you lose $10, even with 210 bushel corn. At $230 you make $60 net. Not a whole lot, correct? On organics we're looking at $388 return. The magic numbers that I look on a lot of these, there's about $300 an acre difference. It's a little more on corn based on that illustration. Let's look at soybeans below. You'll see basically two numbers on soybeans. Originally I projected 65 bushel. We had a lot of people approaching 75. So those are the two numbers, and I think the number we used was 950 or 975. I'll have to check, it's in here. On beans, there's two numbers for organics, 900 and 1200. The 900 is based on and you can help me on this, Wyatt. We used $18 on a feed grade and 24 on a food grade. Is that, do you think those numbers?
24 is probably a little bit high for today's market, but it's in range.
Okay, but that's what we were looking at, and we used 50 bushel as an average yield on organics. So that's where we got those numbers. So again, $1,200 is a kind of a nice number. Expenses, you'll see soybeans are higher on the organic, but as we look down there, if we use 75 bushel of conventional beans versus 50, I think it's $298 difference, so we're close to that $300 range. But that's about the difference we're running into. Okay, let's turn to the next page. This is nice to know information. I get asked often, what is the point? How much do I need to pay for a farm, and how much down to get it to a point that it'll cash flow? First off, most reactions is probably it's not. But on the top conventional, we'll see, I don't know if you can see it, we start at $13,500 on the left, and we work to $7,500 acre price. And then down the axis, we're showing 10% down to 80% down. And we're looking at corn and soybean rotation. We're looking at 200 bushel corn, I think 65 bushel beans. We're looking at $4 corn and $10 beans. And in this situation, there's 56 combinations. I need somebody to help me. How many positive numbers do we see in that table A? And how much? $5. So what does that mean? After you make your land payment, pay all your inputs, you're going to make $5 on a $7,500 farm that you're putting 80% down. Okay, I'm sorry, that's probably not too likely right now, right? Would you agree with that comment? Okay, we still have some land sales, I would say around the 11.5 range. Let's just look at that. You put 20% down. Okay, what it's saying is $460 an acre, or $459 is what we're looking at. You're going to have to subsidize from other acres, which I don't think you're making money. So it's going to have to come from other enterprises, money in the bank, or from an off-farm job. That's why I think we'll see another hiccup in the market. I think the land will come down another notch. I think this is my opinion and has no facts, but what I've seen over the years is land sometimes corrects itself 50% of the high. And if we get to that point, we're looking at $8,000 land. The other thing that's starting to happen is we see a lot of estates now that are saying, oh my gosh, land's going to go down. I'm going to hurry up and put it on the market. And I don't know if you noticed, we've had a lot more land sales starting to occur. And that's going to run the values down. Let's look at organic in comparison. Just for grains conventional, that comes up 1.8% likelihood that you could cash flow. Not very good odds. Not very good odds. Okay, the bottom, we're looking at organics, and we're looking at a rotation of corn, soybeans, wheat, oats, and hay. So we're taking an average net income on those farms and looking at repayment ability, buying a farm on the same basis. Okay, real quick, did anybody check that out? How many numbers do we have are positive? 13. Okay, 13 out of 56, and it's 23%. I like my odds of repaying for a farm on organic compared to conventional. Okay? That's what I wanted to kind of draw to your opinion here. Next page, every year, we always do a lot of work with leases, and in terms of cash rent leases and what's fair for both sides. So what we've done here is look at conventional farmers on a series of 6 different leases, and we compared it to organics. Okay, 50-50 lease, a $225 with a bonus of 25% over $750 on corn and $600 on beans. We looked at 35% gross. We looked at fixed of 250, 300, and 350. And so we looked at both. On the top table up there, what is the least amount of loss we would have on conventional farming? What was the number? $160 is our least amount of loss on conventional farming. Is that a rosy picture? And what's the high that we're showing? What's the largest loss? $359. Okay, does that remind you of the 2015 picture that we just went through? Let's look at organic farming. Using that $1,200, the 150 bushel at $8, okay, what's our range from best or worst position to best position under net cash? 32 to 138, a lot better position. Okay, let's look down here, net cash difference. Remember we were talking about $300? If we double the 50-50 column, that's about $320 difference. And as we go out to 350, that's at $387. So that $300 an acre difference is pretty consistent. One thing that I got a kick out of this, two things that came up to mind. Number one, look at the yields you're going to have to break even. Okay, what's the odds of most conventional farmers raising almost 300 bushel corn to break even? I have coffee with a large farmer, and we have some interesting dialogue. He's not a customer, and he would challenge me, and the relationship would be both ways. But he was telling me he made 275 bushel corn, and there again at coffee, the mine's starting to go, so I took my pin out and I started scratching, and I'm thinking, 275 of the cash rent he's paying, he's breaking even. He's not making money at 275 bushel. And basically what we're looking at there is probably very similar. What's your break-evens on organic corn? About 140 bushel. Is that obtainable in a lot of cases? Okay. All right, let's go to the next page and look at soybeans. One thing I do want to talk about on these things, the perception that I have as a lender, as I put this stuff, that really changed my opinion a little bit. I've always heard 50-50s are the best leases. And even the percentage lease I thought would be very competitive. But when I ran these numbers, okay, I put an asterisk by those because in organic farming, it's so much more time and labor and management. To me, I like the idea of a fixed where you're getting a higher percent, you're making more for that owner. And I think you need to be paid more than a conventional farmer on those type basis because you're putting so much more in. That's something that I wouldn't have thought of, but in looking at these numbers, I think that's probably something you need to look at. Okay, there's a difference in most cases on conventional of about $100 an acre on conventional beans to corn, and we've seen that for years. And up here, what's the range on soybeans, on conventional soybeans, from the low to the high? Okay, so we go basically the best is at minus $100 to 253. So again, that reminds me of the 214 we showed on the first page for 15. Let's look at organic. And organic, we go from $44 to basically a high of 274. So look at the bottom again, and I'm sorry.
Rich, your expense number includes that income tax number?
Yes, it includes all those. And so what I've tried to do is both conventional and organic, I'm using the same numbers across the board for both sides. Okay, everybody's numbers are different. What I'm trying to do is just look at trends.
Hey, Rich?
Yes?
That fixed number in the back, is that 250, 300, 350, is that cash rent? Is that what you're talking
Yes,
about?
yes. Okay, the only numbers that you need to be working on are yours, but these are just a guide so you can draw some conclusions to formulate some things. Look at the net difference. Again, the $300 is what I want you to focus on. Just look at the big picture items. Okay, we're going to talk about three functions today. We're looking at cash flow numbers. The second part that I want to look at is current trends and observations. I'll tell you what, if anybody needs to be excited, this is what gets me excited. Turn to the page that says Observations of an Old Ag Lender. I was at church. I go to a non-denominational church, and the minister got up one Sunday, and I don't know why I listened to this, but this kind of hit home with me. He says, your gray hair is a sign from God of wisdom and knowledge. I don't know that my family believes that, but as I go out, a crown of knowledge, I think he put it. So So sometimes in life, being older and gray hair might come to an advantage in tough times like this. Maybe that's appropriate. Okay, the first thing I want to read you, it says, consumers with new buying habits seek farmers wanting a relationship with them. If you've taken a marketing class in college, that's the whole purpose of marketing. Number one, if their buying habits, they've changed buying habits and they want a relationship with who's producing it. That's a home run. That's where we want to be at. Okay, let's go through some major things. We talked about changing buying habits. Okay, most people my age, when you went out and bought something, the first thing you looked at was price, taste, and convenience. Anybody disagree with that? Those were some of the old buying habits, and that was pretty consistent. Now, all of a sudden, the millenniums and a lot of people are adding some new factors. Those new factors are, I want safe food, I want to look at health concerns, I want wellness considerations, and social media. Are these big deals? Okay, these are huge deals, and they're really making this market grow in very exciting times. The next item I've got down here, consumers are willing to pay 25% premium for healthier foods. Okay, how many people in here go to the grocery store and buy items in the grocery store? Okay, what is a dozen eggs and a gallon of milk approximately?
Organic or other?
No, just conventional. Okay, at Walmart, the last time I shopped, you could have bought both of them for around $1. A gallon of milk for $1, and you could have bought organic eggs for 75 cents to $1. When I look at the organics in the next row, what do you think those prices were?
$3.99 and $6.
I was going to say they were around $4. Okay, the last time I checked, that's more than 25%. That's a 400% markup. So what I'm saying, they wouldn't have them on the shelves if they couldn't move them and people weren't willing to pay for them. So what I'm saying, that 25% increase is probably conservative, but that shows the difference in buying habits. Okay, this is an interesting statistic, and 73% or 3/4 of today's consumers are buying organic products occasionally. 73%. This kind of hit home with me. I've got a daughter-in-law that works at Farm Bureau in Indiana, and we were out visiting with them, and I had the munchies, and I went in the cupboard, and there was some organic chips in there, and I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's got these. And so when I read that, you know, you're seeing it in every household. And so organics is not something bad. Everybody's trying and doing some of it. Presently, over the past 10 years, if you look at the growth in the organic and non-GMO markets, we're averaging a minimum of 10% growth annually. That's pretty amazing. And it's steady, it's stable. Okay, I was at a World Food meeting. That is a processor. They're based out of Iowa. They're putting a buying location and transportation facility up at Morris, Illinois, and we were visiting with him. He made a comment, and it got my attention. It said, by the year 2018, grocery stores want to offer all non-GMO and organic products. Wow, you realize the impact that's going to have when you're growing at a 10% clip? So I thought, okay, you need to check sources. I have a son that works in marketing research at Walmart in the home office. And I asked him that question. I said, where's Walmart? He says, Dad, we're working in that direction also. So if that happens, do you realize how fast and how exciting that's going to be? If you're not sure where organics are, turn the TV on and listen to the commercials. Okay, how many of us knew that the changes in dog food? I always thought you just went out and bought dog food and it was $5 a bag, right? No. Now we have to get away from cereals and grains, and we want meat and we want vegetables, and we want to spend $30 a bag for dog food, right? So what I'm saying is that's where the millenniums, that's where the consumers are pushing things. Okay, did you ever think you would go to Hardee's and buy a natural burger that's grass-fed at Hardee's? Hunt's now in their commercial says we have an organic division, we have a conventional division. So I mean, it's amazing some of the changes that are taking place. You know, we talk about this year being in Central Illinois being a Cub fan and how miraculous that is. I'm not so sure that me speaking on organics 5 years ago is, you know, that may be more miraculous than the Cubs, to be honest with you. We come full circle, and my wife, you know, for the first 6 months or a year, it's like, what are you doing and why are you doing this? Do I think organics is going to take over the world? No, but there's room for everybody. But as Fred Kirschman said, those that are in organics are going to make more per bushel. Those raising conventional, you're going to have less and less markets, and you're going to have to raise more bushels. Okay, 2 weeks ago in Bloomington, Illinois. Anybody go down Veterans Parkway? Okay, we were driving in the evening, and I looked up, and there was a billboard that I saw. Okay, this was amazing. It was in Famous Dave's parking lot. Does anybody have an idea where I'm at now? And okay, this billboard is a blue billboard with white lettering, and it goes something like this: organic, or what Grandma used to call food. Okay, this is in Veterans Parkway in Bloomington, Illinois, about a half mile away from Farm Bureau's corporate office, and one of the busiest streets in Bloomington. You know that you've arrived when those things happen. Another thing that we'll talk about is you're starting to see the ADMs and some of the big corporations wanting to get into ag. That can be good and bad, and we'll talk about that. Number 2, let's go in the observations, get back to that. In a soil and water conservation handout recently, they had the 4 items that I want to go over with you. To improve the health of the soils. Keep the soil covered as much as possible. Disturb the soil as little as possible. Keep plants growing throughout the year to feed the soil, and diversify as much as possible using crop rotation. This is organic farming 101, folks. This is what the soil and water wants all of us to do. And I can see this being in the farm bills coming down the road. So who's going to have to change? Are organic farmers going to have to change, or conventional farmers? Okay, there's going to be a lot of change, but it's probably not the people in this room. So to me, that's very positive and upbeat. Okay, seek new ways to generate more stable and profitable returns. We went through the cash flow numbers. There's an economic value, but you don't get into organic farming for the money. You get into it because it's the right reason, for passion and love, and it's a long-term commitment. EPA water concerns are real. We had the Chesapeake Bay, we had Des Moines River, we have water systems that are being monitored. What is that going to mean? We're going to have to look at cover crops getting away from nitrogen. We're going to have restrictions on fertilizer and chemical and farming practices. Who's that going to affect the most? Conventional farmers. Is that going to affect organic farmers? No. Those are other things that are going to happen. Opportunities for diversification, value-added services. There are so many things that we can do, whether we put up a mill, whether we feed our grain to our livestock and add value added, whether we do more process and go direct to the consumers. What I'm seeing happen in a lot of cases, family members want to come back to the farm, and there's additional opportunities that we can generate more income sources. Next item, organic and niche producers will be the beneficiaries of lower prices on land, more rented ground available, and cheaper machinery. Land is continuing to come down. Rented ground, we're seeing some of that. I see more of that in the next year. Machinery's already dropped significantly. Okay, the next item I chuckle at. Let's go to the second line. Farmers are learning to live with more weeds. Is that something you ever thought somebody would be saying to an organic group? What I've actually seen at some of the meetings I've attended, and it's been humorous, they put up pictures on the screen and say which one of these are organic and which are conventional. And you know what? There's not a whole lot of difference now in a lot of cases. And what's ironic about that, we had conventional farmers spending $90 an acre on weed control. Some of them have had to get people to walk beans. And third, some of them have went in the machine sheds, found an old piece of steel called a row cultivator. And they've had to get those out of retirement and start working. The thing that I enjoy and appreciate working with organic farmers, we don't try to temporarily kick the can. We've heard a lot of that in politics down the road on weed control. What we want to do is fix the problem by matching the nutrients in the soil and balancing to minimize weed problems. I was in a meeting at Iowa State, and a guy got up talking about weed control. And he said, I'm not aware of any effective chemicals, new chemicals that are coming out for weed control in the last 20 years. So if you're doing that, you have to have products coming out all the time. That hasn't been happening. So I actually think in organic production, you're in a better position to deal with some of the weeds. Are they going to be an issue? Yes, but you're going to have to manage them, and that's part of it. This is probably a very positive thing. It says start small, learn, be profitable, and grow the business. A lot of people are worried about everybody jumping into organics. What I'm starting to see is a lot of people that are looking at it are looking at, well, I've got some CRP ground that I can do on small acres. Maybe I'll put 40 acres, and I'll try to minimize my losses and get experience and grow. To me, that's the most profitable way. I've heard stories of people, I'm going to switch 600 acres. Oh my gosh, that is a nightmare waiting to happen, right? to take 600 acres and put it in a transition due to the economic loss that you're going to incur and all the other issues. Okay, this is a very important part. Learn from mentors. I don't care if you're a conventional farmer. We've got a lot of young farmers that have never been through hard times. They need to talk to mentors. If you're an organic, avoid making the same mistakes of other people. And one of the things Dave talks about, and I've heard him say this a lot, is you're going to set yourself back so many years on a lot of the things that you're doing if you don't get the right start and continue on the right basis. Okay, let's go through some data real quick, and how am I doing on time-wise?
You are doing great.
Okay.
About half an hour.
Okay, that's great. Okay, FinBen data. The reason I don't have Illinois data is they do not break out organic from conventional. FinBen data is 11 states, primarily like North Dakota, South Dakota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and some of those states. There's 3,436 farmers, but we look at organic compared to conventional. And what I want you to look at, don't necessarily look at like the yields, but look at the relationships. That's what I want to draw from. So on the bottom of page where it says FinBen data, 11 states, let's go down to the 10-year average price on bushels, and we're going to look at percentages. Over the last 10 years, organic has been at 213% of conventional prices. My magic number that I use is 200%. So over 10 years, you've been over 200% difference. On corn, we've been at 220%. So where are we at today on those numbers? We're at soybeans at 253% below that and 229. One of the problems as those numbers widen, what happens, more people want to import grain in at cheaper prices. And that'll be an issue that we'll talk about. That's both a positive and a negative that we're importing and we have opportunities to grow. Okay, let's turn to the next page and let's look at yields. The only thing I'm going to say, as we go to the northern states, our yields are less. We've had more wet weather and cold weather, or wet and cold weather, so these yields aren't as high. But let's look at the percentages. So as we look at soybeans, we're at 55% for a 10-year average. Corn is at 63%. When I started looking at this stuff, we were at 50% of conventional yields. So those both reflect a positive change. When I look at Illinois and current data, I'm at 71% on soybeans and 68%. One of the things that I'll talk about here in the future is basically that we're looking between 65 and 75% is where I think we're going to be at on some of these situations. As the seed improves, technology improves, and some of the fertilizer alternatives that we're doing, I think we'll see some improvements. The next page to me is not as important. It looks at the net return. If we know that the price and the yield are good, then net return is going to be better. Okay, the last section I want to cover is what your lender needs to know about organic crops. If you have not went into a bank, then that's an experience. And I know, I've been on the other side of that, and I've got some of your surveys back. I know that that's a challenge. And when I started researching, what I've tried to put in here is the things that kind of pushed my buttons and got me excited. Number one, organic producers can now insure their crop at the same price per bushel if sold before the acreage reporting date. We are fortunate to have some people talking in insurance, and they'll go into a lot more detail. I just want to cover this as a lender. If we looked at 85% CRC, I roughed out the other day what a guarantee would be. On organic crops, if you had your crop sold by July 15th at some of the prices that might have been available, you could have got a $1,091 guarantee on organics, $564 on conventional. So that was 193%. The percentages that I look at on that are usually at least 150% more guarantee. On soybeans, we looked at 1,020. On soybeans, conventional at 539. Why is that important? Why would a guarantee be important to the farmer? Anybody have any thoughts? What's a guarantee? That's a safety blanket saying that that's your minimum amount of money that you're going to make, okay? Either due to price or yield. So why is it important to a lender? Anybody have any thoughts? Repayment ability, less risk. The other thing at our bank is we use your guarantee as collateral. We take that dollar amount. Is that important as times get tougher and you go into the bank? They're going to look at collateral value. So that means that I've got $400 an acre more ability to borrow money than I did on a conventional basis. The other thing that we're starting to discover as times have got tough in these numbers, Bank examiners are coming in saying, is this working? Do you have a plan? And they're looking at these loans a lot. I don't know how many of you have heard, but a lot of things being discussed at the coffee shop is the economic environment at a lot of banks and lending institutions getting a lot tighter. So everybody's looking at these things, and you're going to have to go in the bank and not say, hey, what's the rates? Now what we're looking at, in a lot of cases, people are coming in and say, will you finance me next year? So the worms kind of turned a little bit. United States is presently importing 60% of the organic products. Okay, that says there's a tremendous opportunity for growth, but as we've seen this last year, we've had a lot of grain brought into the country that there's been questions whether it's organic certified or not, and it's brought our price down. So that is an issue that's being dealt with hopefully right now. Okay, we have Wyatt Muse here, and one of the meetings I was at, Len Clarkson made this comment, and please let me know if I don't say this right. Len sells to a lot of Japanese buyers, and he made this comment, and he said, why are you buying grain from me when you guys import or export in the United States? And if I remember what he said, he basically said the Japanese buyers said, we trust the standards in the United States more than we do our own country. So we have a good product. And I was at a co-op meeting the other day, and they were talking about this. And I said, this is an area we need to inform our consumers. We have a lot of momentum with consumers. Make sure that they buy the United States organic produce that's been certified. That's a big deal. But if you got 60% growth just in the United States, that's an infant market. So there's a lot of growth potential. Yields are improving. What I talked about there is 60 to 75% growth, or 60 to 75% of conventional. Both organic crop prices received and net returns have been stable and consistent for 10 years. The last 2 years, in a lot of cases, if you had organic producers and conventional, the cash flows that we saw that were working were organic. And if you were an organic farmer, you probably didn't have some of the frank discussions we had on the conventional basis and with the upcoming changes that were going to need to be made. Okay, the next item we talk about is organic farmers had more cash, so that means we looked at the table of buying farms, so you're in a position to be able to do things. Organic crop rotations, this is something that nobody talks about, is being good stewards of the soil. Organic crop rotations and farming practices promote stewardship of the soil by making soils healthier, more balanced, renewed, and more productive. Is that important? Yes. More organic matter in the soil, feeding the microbes, more earthworms, and increased water holding capabilities of the soil. One of the things that I think is interesting, I remember all the days when my dad would plow and you'd see the birds following the plow. Anybody remember those days? Okay, how many birds do we see following the equipment in the field? I don't see very many. And the logical question is we don't have earthworms. And I'll tell you what, if you study what an earthworm does, I'm not so sure that's not the most important piece of machinery you have on a farm. And we've got away from those. What they do with organic matter and converting the soil and aeration, and they do a wonderful job for us. Mother Nature gave us, and we've got away from that. One of the other things that I look at is organic matter. Gabe Brown made a comment that for every inch of organic matter you have in the soil, that is equivalent to 27 to 28,000 gallon of water holding capability. Okay, right now I see a lot of people putting tile to get rid of the water, but what are we doing to save it for dry weather? One of these years we're going to have some dry weather. And the only answer I'm hearing, well, we're putting a spigot on it, so we're going to shut it off and save some water. Well, if you have organic matter, you look at the households, what do? We put mulch to save water. Okay, organic matter is our mulch in the fields, and we've got away from that. That is a big deal. I like the comments that Gabe Brown talks about. He says, with the organic matter that I built in my soils, it's less risky and more productive. Isn't that what we all want? If I'm a landowner or a banker and you come in and show me a way that you're going to have less risk and make more money and improve the soil, hey, that's a win-win. Next page, I got recommendations for organic farming. You can kind of read through that. Basically, work with mentors, have a transition plan. And transition plan, what I look at is hay, wheat, oats, grazing. Get away from corn and soybeans just because of the weed control problems initially. And be prepared to lose money for the first couple years. I know there's some things being worked on, but I think the numbers that I played with around $170 an acre you could potentially lose for a couple years. Find a landowner that okay.
That would be less than raising the crop.
Right, right. So when you go into it, and that goes into the next point, sit down with your landowner and say, you know what, I'm going to lose money. Can we renegotiate or have a less rent those first 2 or 3 years during transition? And what I've tried to do is say, in my opinion, what you're going to be looking at is improving the land value of between $500 and $1,000, what it's worth. And in exchange for that, help me those first couple years.
Do you see a difference in land values?
Yes, yes.
Organic versus non-organic?
I've seen a big difference. You look at some CRP ground that is sold this year, and the whole idea that it sold so high was because it could directly come into organics right out of the chute. And you know, I've also seen an organic farm that had irrigation. Wow, you want to see something with a high price? Now you can get in all kinds of specialty markets. That does make a difference. I have tried to talk with various people about increasing the appraised value. There's just not enough of those, but it does make a difference when you look at earnings potential. Okay, we talked about that. Grain storage is a must if you're going into organics or non-GMOs. And the other thing that you got to do is be able to have a cash flow that adjusts so that they're not going to pick it up in the fall. You're going to be at their mercy, and your cash flow is going to have to reflect these things. So maybe it's 3 months, 6 months down the road, and you need to be ready for that. Seek assistance to market crops. Probably the two biggest concerns in organics as a lender would be weeds, and the second one, making sure that you market your crops right. What I've seen is you could probably market beans for 16 bucks and you might get closer to 30, depending on the specific markets that might be available. And as it goes up, there's more hoops, there's more regulations. But what I'm saying is that makes a big difference on the bottom line, and it goes right to that point. The last thing is you've got to have support of your family, your landowners, and your lenders. Okay, we'll skip through producer traits. You can kind of read through those. I want to go through producer concerns. What are the big things as you're sitting around the table that I hear often? Number one is weed control. That's probably the number one problem that people talk about organics. 2, properly drained soils. And what I've seen is if you got properly drained soils, you probably have less weeds. So those two go hand in hand. Number 3, this goes back to many conversations with Dave Bishop, fixing soils, allowing biologicals to work in the soils. If you get everything balanced, that's also going to help weed control and production. Okay, this is an important one. When you go into organics, you got to be able to number one, walk 12 months of the year, and you also got to be able to handle stress. Stress from the fact that it's so much different, and you got a lot of people driving by doing windshield appraisals on what you're doing and how you're doing things. So the point that I'm saying, financial stress, emotional stress, and physical stress. You're going to have to deal with those. Listen to changing things and ways. Is that a big deal? Yes, it is. And you've had to overcome that, but what we're talking about here this morning is a lot of conventional farmers are going to be doing that. Another concern is educating, informing, and communicating family landowners and lenders. That's what I'm trying to do, but that is a big deal. That's probably our biggest challenge. I put groundwater. I worry about the amount of groundwater that we have in our soils. That's probably going to be the next resource. And recently I had Big Ag taking over organic industry, and I worry about that. One of the most important things is to make sure that this industry stays in the hands of individual producers out here in this room that both own it, control it, and manage it. Okay, my wife, her favorite expression, bottom line, quit talking. So let's bring it to a conclusion. Bottom line, good news as we talked at the beginning, more stable and profitable operations for organic producers. That's a big deal. Conservation changes are coming, and what they're going to do is make organic farming more the norm than not, and conventional farmers are going to change. Growing market with growing consumer demand. Yeah, that's a pretty major good thing. Lenders are interested in organic farming. We're probably getting more calls and people talking. Okay, what is this organic thing and so forth. One of my goals for the next year, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I would like to have some organic people speaking at the Community Bankers, Independent Bankers, and American Bankers Association, just to get the message out. And that would be a huge thing. I'm not saying convert everybody, but just get the message and information out. The next item we've got down here is landowners and financial brokers seeking organic farming. Okay, I've been at this 33 years. In the last 2 years, about every place I've spoke, I've either had a financial broker or a landowner come up and say, do you know a good tenant, a good organic tenant that would be interested in farming my ground? Okay, 31 years, I never had too many people in either one of those come and say, hey, do you know a good conventional farmer that would be interested in farming my ground? You didn't have to do that. So what I'm saying is when landowners are seeking you and investors are wanting to buy farms for you with a 10-year payback, that's pretty amazing. Those are exciting things. We spoke up at Chicago Farm Owners, and there was about 35 people in the room wanting to know more about organics. That's when you see the excitement of the snowball rolling down the hill and the people like Jack Ersman that started this. And you know, it's fun to come in on the tail end of those kind of things. Growing number of both organic grain buyers and processors. As the consumer markets continue to grow, there's more and more people getting into it. Wyatt's firm and some other places are looking at new markets for transitional grain. And it's pretty exciting when you have grain buyers that are also going through transition and organic. They believe in it as well. And these are really good people, and I have a lot of respect for Clarkson Grain and Wyatt, and I appreciate their comments and their work. Promote stewardship of the soil. These are all really good things. Wyatt, can I get you to do a job for me? Sure. Okay, I wanted to make sure everybody's got payback or something to take home today, and probably didn't dazzle you with brilliance, and I didn't want to pass out BS. Most of you are from the farm, and you get enough of that on the farm. So what I'm going to do is give you $1, so you got take-home information. If you want to take that to your existing banker, say, hey, there was a banker the other day that invested in my operation, so get on board. So if you'll pass the dollar bill to everybody. I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to be with you here today. And we'll open it up for questions. And in case you have questions after the meeting, my email's on here and my phone number. Feel free to get a hold of me. I'm not doing this for me or the bank. I'm doing this to help the industry. And so any questions? Questions or comments? And remember, I'm the warm-up act. The best is yet to come and the other speakers. So.
I got a question.
Okay, fire away.
On the organic income, that you had $1,200 an acre, did that come from your survey? Pull that number out?
Okay, what we actually did, I went out to some farms. Yes. Okay, the question was, where did the $1,200 on organic income come from? What I actually did this summer, I went out and did some yield checks on organic farms and tried to take an average. And what I was looking at in a lot of cases of 150 bushel corn and 50 bushel beans as being a realistic number. And then what I was doing is using the $24 a bushel on food grade. One thing that, as I've been out speaking on a lot of these things, I'll have people say, hey, your numbers are conservative. Okay, I may not be wearing wingtips, but I'm a banker, and I would rather somebody come in and say, hey, your numbers are low, my numbers are better. That's great. But what I have a problem is when people, you can do whatever you want to with numbers, and I want to make sure that these are legitimate numbers that are usable. Yes?
On a valued added, like we have this compost operation
Yes.
with our, do you recommend separating that from our farming operation? I mean, we're using it on our organic acres, but hopefully in the next year we'll have enough that we can sell to area farms.
My first reaction is if you've got a lender, I would keep it together because there's so many ties and it'd be hard to separate it. If you're getting special programs, a lot of times one might be a business and one might be a farming operation depending on classification. And if that's the case, you might have to separate them. But if you can keep them together, that would make the most sense. What we look at is the bottom line.
Okay.
That's what pays bills. Other questions, comments? Okay. Yes. Okay, Iroquois Valley is one of the principals, and what they would do is buy a farm, and then you rented it for 10 years with an option that you could buy it back in the future, and then they would set a % of the payment based on the purchase price. And the only problem, when land got up to $16,000, they were wanting maybe a 3% fee plus taxes in their cash rents, so those got high. But as land values back down, that's going to be more fair. But a lot of them there are a lot of places wanting to look because the first thing the investors are looking at, if you're an organic producer, once you're certified, you're going to generate more money. So you can afford to pay a higher and more stable cash rent than conventional farmers. And they will allow you to rent it with the option that you can buy it at any point in time in the next 10 years. I'm assuming it. I haven't walked through any of those, but I know they've done several of those. The person to ask on that would be Harold Wilkins when he comes over here, if he's coming, because he's not. Okay. Okay. But what I was going to say, he's done a lot with Iroquois Valley. They're a very good, legitimate firm. But I also have seen many other companies starting to get in that industry. It's amazing when you get calls that say, hey, do you know any organic farmers? We'll buy farms and let them rent it. And then the first question out of my mouth is, at what rent? And then what's the terms? And what's the buyback? So we start asking those questions. Okay? Oh, you had a question back here.
I know you said that people have been looking for organic farmers, but how far ranging in the area are you talking about?
Okay, when I was up at Woodstock last year, I had some people coming over. It just depends where they're located. We have people here all over the state. So it depends how far you want to travel. The other things that I've done in some cases is, probably wouldn't be a bad idea in your local papers, like a Bloomington paper around here, put a blind column, seeking landowners to let us farm organically. Another thing that is starting to happen in some cases, we're seeing some farm management services starting to entertain organic farming because of the additional income that it generates. That hasn't, it's still got a long ways to come, but at least it's being discussed now. But if you put a blind ad just, seeking landowners to rent to farm organically, there are some people, some of these consumers that are paying these premiums understand it and they get it. Okay, or somebody over here had a question.
No, I just want, you talked a lot about corn and soybeans, and I probably Dave would kind of confirm that, but, we're specialty farmers and
Right.
orchards and vegetables and stuff like that. And we see our cash flow differences in the product in the 300 to 400%.
Right, okay.
Pretty consistent.
One thing I want to apologize, I still am a lender, but some things that I want to spend more time on in the next year. I want to get one project done, was looking at grazing and the return that you would have on grass-fed beef compared to corn and soybeans. And I started putting that together, and that was a lot more challenging, and I didn't get it done. I spoke last year at a cattle meeting, and I thought, I'm going to have that ready. No. I ran into nightmares trying to pull numbers together. The other thing I want to say is you're going to look at these numbers and say, why are you just doing corn and soybeans? Okay, my next thing that I want to do is be able to have 5 crop rotation showing each year the income, take an average of those, and that's going to be a more realistic picture. But there again, sometimes it's based on the time and information you have available. There's a lot more things I would like to do, but we're starting from the foundation. Questions, comments, criticisms? Yes?
Richard, you were going to mention the impact of ADM coming into the ag market.
Okay, we've heard stories of big companies buying in. The question was, I mentioned the comment like ADM's getting into the organic market. We've also heard of companies coming in, buying farm ground, and saying, okay, we'll let you be a custom tenant on that farm. Okay, I've seen that in the turkey industry, the chicken industry, and in some cases the hog industry. So what does that do for the producer? You work for a minimal amount of money. You do not own the ground, you are just a tenant. And tenants can be replaced. And this industry is based on the people that have went out and built up the market and paid the price, and you hate to give that up just and let somebody else make the money on it. So I believe in co-ops or mentors. Make sure that you're working with people and that you get coached right, you make money, and you stay involved as a group. We've seen situations where large people with a lot of money want to come in and buy a lot of acres and own it. I had this summer, I was at Costco, was wanting to buy farms for tenants and then for them to raise specific products. Well, if they own the farm and they tell you what to raise, okay, doesn't that sound like some of the Tyson thing where we own the chickens and you raise them for them on a custom basis and we're going to pay you a custom fee, and then what ends up happening is that keeps getting less and less, and you lose control and you lose the income that you made on some of these things. I'm just saying continue to stay independent as long as you can to be viable and profitable. This is a good growing market, and it's not something you want to give up on. So I worry about some of their motives. And maybe there's other people in the room. Jack, what's your opinion on that?
If you don't own it, you probably won't keep it.
Okay. I appreciate those comments, and that pretty much summarizes it. I tell you what, we're very fortunate. Today we have Jeff Cook in the room from FSA and Tony Smellin from FMHA. We have Rebecca Houston in the back from the Treasurer's Office. And is the Illinois Finance Authority going to be here? He will be here. This is exciting when you're seeing all these different organizations that want to work and finance farmers here today to, number one, to get facts and to exchange ideas and say, how can we help? To me, that's very gratifying as a lender. If they're supporting it, guess what? They're going to support it to the banks. And that ends up coming back and helping you. So they have a good message, and the fact that they're here today is a pretty good step. So any other questions, comments? Again, thank you. Use your dollar wisely, and remember I invested. I know I will not send you a tax return.